let's talk about smut for beginners. If you've watched this channel at all, you've probably heard a lot about smut. I am practically a connoisseur at this point. I read a lot of erotica every month. I definitely know what I like and what I don't. But I wanted to make a video for people who are maybe just getting into the genre, who think that it seems a little out of their comfort zone, because it definitely can be daunting if you've never read it before. I'm into things that are a little rougher, a little more taboo, I guess. So this isn't going to be like my personal favorite smut. This is going to be a list for people who are just getting into it, that just want to dip their toe in and try it out. The first book on this list is Willing Victim by Cara Mckenna. I absolutely adore this book. I read this book a couple years ago. It actually made it into like my top 10 books of that year. This is a book about two characters who kind of just have a chance encounter. The main character feels this connection and this attraction for this man. She wants to go on a date with him, but he kind of tells her to like step back a little because he's not sure that she'll be as interested once she gets to know him better. So he invites her along to one of his boxing matches so that she can get an idea of just how rough he is, I guess. I absolutely adore the love interest in the story. He is just so down to earth and normal. Like I'm so used to reading eroticas and smutty books where there's like a certain type of love interest where they're brooding and extremely intellectual but kind of an asshole. You know, they're all around just like not a great person and they have a tragic backstory, etc, etc, etc. Whereas in this book, Flynn is just a regular guy. He works construction, you know, he doesn't have some insane income. He can't take the main character on a helicopter ride or something. He's just a normal dude who happens to be pretty hot, and they have some great sex that is grounded in consent and boundaries, while also like pushing their comfort zone a little bit to try things that, you know, are still exciting but in a normal way. Because of how grounded this book is, I feel like it is a perfect book for someone who's just trying to get into this genre. The next books I want to talk about are Bully and Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. I would actually say that most of Penelope Douglas's books are perfect for people just getting into smut, because A, she is a really great writer. Sometimes in the smut genre, you're going to get things that are not well edited, whereas I feel like Penelope Douglas is just solid. You're never going to go into one of her books and just like find all these glaringly obvious, you know, spelling errors or grammatical errors. It's just good writing. But I also think her work is perfect for somebody who wants a little bit of taboo, but nothing that's really over the line. I feel like her books are kind of dark romance light. But I've read several of Penelope Douglas's books at this point. I don't personally like Punk 57, so I'm not going to recommend that one. But Bully and Corrupt, I feel like, are both solid. They're good dark romances. They both have to do with somewhat of a bully concept where the main character is treated somewhat shitty by the love interest at first, but I don't really feel like it's ever too bad. Personally, I love the book Fear Me by B.B. Reed, which is the same concept except way, way darker. If you haven't read any bully romances, I would say start with Bully. I definitely think it's lighter on the bully elements despite the title, whereas Corrupt is just a little bit rougher. But either way, I feel like they're a great entry point into dark romance. The next thing on this list is Cruel Magic by Eva Chase. This is a reverse harem paranormal series with a main character who never realizes that she has paranormal powers until the day her parents are murdered and she is stolen from them. She gets spirited away to this magical boarding school where she finds out that her entire life has been a lie. Her parents are not in fact her parents, they are actually people who stole her from her real parents, who were subsequently murdered that same night that she was kidnapped. She now finds out that she is like one of the founding families of this magical school, along with 4 other families that all have sons that are her age. She ends up going to the school with them and trying to realize her magical powers. Unfortunately, she gets off on the wrong foot with all of these guys, and they all start kind of tormenting her and trying to break her down. But of course, this is a reverse harem, so she is going to end up in some sort of romantic entanglement with all of them. If you're already someone who reads paranormal books, I feel like this is a great one to get into. It will kind of bridge the gap and make it easier to get into this like erotica, and honestly there's not a ton of romance in this first book. I've read the first 3 books in this series, and they are very much a slow burn series. She really only gets involved with one of the guys in this first book. I don't read a ton of fantasy, so I can't really speak to the magical elements of this book. I can't speak to whether or not the magic system holds up or anything, but I very much enjoyed all the fantastical backstory that this series has. I really like magic schools in general, or at least the idea of them, despite the fact that I don't really read them a lot. More than anything, I just really like this main character. She's this independent, like, badass female who just, like, she really takes no shit from anyone, which is why she gets on the bad side of these guys. She's just a really good person, which I like seeing, because I feel like a lot of the time whenever you get a strong female character, they like have to be kind of a shitty person in some way who doesn't care about others, whereas I feel like this character really shows that you can be strong and good. I personally love a slow burn romance because I feel like you get more time to connect with each of the love interests, especially in a reverse harem series. That is really necessary. And I feel like if you're new to the genre, then starting off slow might be helpful as well. Next one I want to talk about is Bad Things by RK Lilley. So this is one of the first eroticas I ever read, so this was something I read quite a long time ago, and yet it's always stuck with me, which I think really says just how good it was. I actually don't remember a ton about the actual premise, but what I do remember is the characters. I remember falling in love with every single character in this book and their dynamic with each other, because they had this like found family aspect, which I absolutely love and I wish was in more eroticas. I think that having an erotica that has such strong and likable characters definitely makes it easier to get into the genre. RK Lilley is also a master of sex scenes. There is one sex scene from this book that has still stuck with me to this day, and I absolutely love it. The ending of this book also stuck with me. There's just a lot to love about this series. I believe that this is a book about 2 people who end up having to live together, and they kind of have this like hate to love situation, but I am going to check. The synopsis on Goodreads is vague as hell, and it just says that she falls in love with bad boys, he comes along and changes her whole life. That doesn't really mean much, but hopefully you'll just have to take my word for the fact that this was a really good book. The next book I have on this list is Crave by Cartwright. This is a second chance romance, which is not something I read a lot of. This also has BDSM aspects. It is about 2 characters who used to date. She broke up with him, I believe, and now she flies to this conference to try and get him back. One of the things I really loved about this book was how it like broke down BDSM. I feel like it really explored just like the concept of BDSM and explained it to anyone who maybe wasn't familiar with it in a really easy to know sort of way, and easy to understand, because I feel like sometimes people don't understand that like it's more than just physical and there is an emotional aspect to it as well. And I feel like Cartwright in general does that really well. This is the 3rd book I believe I read from her, and in all of her books she just really focuses on that emotional importance. I really liked the 2 main characters. I really liked the emotional impact their history had on their story. I don't read a lot of second chance romances, and yet reading this one made me want to read more. I felt like you could feel like the heartache and like how much they didn't necessarily trust each other because of what they had gone through before. You know, we've all been through breakups, and it's definitely hard to like trust people again, especially trying to trust the person who broke your heart in the first place. If you're at all interested in BDSM, I think this is a good one to check out. The next book on my list is The Deal by Elle. This is a college set fake dating romance. I believe there's also a sports element to this as well, if you're into that. What I really appreciated about this book was how realistic the characters are. I would put this near Willing Victim in terms of just the fact that it felt very down to earth. These felt like real characters handling their emotions in a mature way, which is not something I get to read a lot of, because the one thing about erotica is that a lot of the romances are usually very over the top, very dramatic, melodramatic, and I feel like this one truly like brought me back to college in a way. Like the name suggests, the characters in this book make a deal. She will tutor him so that he can stay on his sports team. I don't remember what the sport was. And he will help her make one of the guys on his team jealous because she has a crush on him and wants to date him. Eventually, of course, they start to have feelings for each other and, you know, etc. Romance ensues. I felt like every part of this book just felt so realistic and charming, and watching them flirt and have those just like first crush, first date interactions was just so lovely. Like most romance books, this had one of those third act complications that they had to come up against, and immediately I get annoyed at those pretty much in every book, but I feel like this book did such a good job of showing the fact that these were mature characters who knew how to handle things. Like, all they did was communicate, and then that was it. They dealt with it. And that was so refreshing to see. I so completely believed in their friendship, and I think that made all the difference in this book, because I really fell in love with each of their characters and just wanted to see them happy together. Elle Kennedy is a really good writer, and I felt like every aspect of this book just felt well explored, and so I feel like she would be a great place for anyone to start with. Okay, so I think I'm actually going to do a part 2 to this, because I'm only halfway down my list and I've already been filming for 25 minutes, and I'm kind of considering starting to do shorter videos. So the last book I'm going to talk about is Tears of Tess by Pepper Winters. Now, this is definitely more on the dark side of romance. Now, this is kind of a kidnapper romance, which is its own subgenre in erotica. This is about a girl who goes on vacation with her boyfriend and ends up getting drugged and kidnapped and sold into the sex trade. She ends up being sold to this very wealthy, brooding gentleman who ends up, I guess, trying to break her down and make her into the perfect sex slave for him. Now, I've read a lot of books like this, weirdly enough, and I feel like this is kind of the basis in which they were all written. It's not. I believe Story of O is technically like the original, so I'm not trying to say that this is the first book ever like this, but I do feel like this is kind of like the solid foundation that a lot of other ones were built upon. So I personally read this for the first time last year or the year before, and it felt like, oh, I've read this before. But it's solidly written, and I feel like if you haven't read any books like this, this is a great one to start with, at least to figure out whether or not you're into this sort of thing. Pepper Winters is a great writer. I've read many of her books, and I've really enjoyed most of them. Once again, you're not going to come into any like really shitty writing, so I feel like that's one of the reasons that this is a good one to start with. I also think it gets you acquainted with the types of tropes you are going to see throughout these types of stories in dark romance. There's obviously some very dark elements in this book, but I don't believe that there's anything too over the top. There is one scene that definitely toes the line, but they end up pulling back on it, so I feel like if you're at all interested in a kidnapper romance, then you'll probably be able to handle anything in this book. Hopefully you're able to find something in this list to enjoy, and hopefully you'll come back for part 2. Thanks for watching this video. Bye.